All right, this is our last video for Chapter 9 and Section 11.7. We'll be looking at monopolistic competition. This is based on Section 11.7 in the textbook, just so you're aware if you're looking for that reference. So with monopolistic competition, it's going to be our third market structure that we look at, and it's going to be closer to perfect competition than strict monopoly. So like perfect competition, monopolistically competitive markets are going to have many firms. They are going to have fewer than the perfectly competitive model, but it will have many more than the monopoly model. The products that monopolistically competitive firms make are going to be what we call differentiated. And this wording is really important. It's not just that they're different, it's that they're differentiated. Okay. And what that means is that the products are going to be very, very similar, except for specific characteristics. So that could be like if you think about different pens, right? All of the black pens are writing utensils that have black ink, but some of them might have different grips. Some of them might have different point sizes, right? One might be fine point and one might be medium point. They might be ballpoint pen. They might be another kind of pen, right? That changes the way that the ink flows out of the pen. All of those small characteristic differences are what make a product differentiated, right? All of them are black pens, but they're different enough that for consumers, they're not necessarily perfect substitutes, right? If someone hates ballpoint pens, that is not going to be a perfect substitute for them, right? For their preferred pen. Um, Lastly here, barriers to entry. We're going to see, just like perfect competition, that there are no barriers to entry in monopolistically competitive markets. So what we have are markets where firms can come and go, and they can make differentiated products. So we're going to see innovation in the way that people usually think about it, with regard to entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurs are not only going to be just entering and exiting a market, but actually adjusting their product's characteristics in order to sort of carve out a niche for their good, right, and reduce its substitutability. And so that is going to give us our definition of monopolistic competition. It's a market structure characterized by many firms selling a differentiated product where there are no barriers to entry. And the key, again, assumption here is that firms differentiate their product, and it is to reduce how substitutable it is, right? This is the important part of this model structure. Other firms, what we're going to see will impact that firm's demand curve, right? A ballpoint pen that's slightly different from the one I make is going to impact the number of consumers that choose to purchase my product and how much they purchase for me. But what we'll see is that the firms are going to ignore that impact. They're going to avoid any sort of strategic interaction, and they're just going to focus on their own production output and the price. All right. And the reason that the textbook emphasizes this is to distinguish it from other forms of imperfect competition, specifically oligopoly. Right. When we get to oligopoly, you'll see that the firms are now behaving strategically in adjusting directly in response to the action of other firms. And third, no barriers to entry, like we've talked about. So as firms enter and exit, that will have an impact on the firm we're focusing on, their demand curve. Okay. So let's look at an example graph. So you can see here on the left a graph of a monopolistically competitive market. In this market, we have the quantity of meals. And right now we have just that single firm in the market. Our demand curve for this firm is downward sloping because it has some market power. It's not facing an infinite number of perfect substitutes for its good. And so what we're going to see here is that our perfectly competitive firm is going to produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. And note that that marginal revenue curve is distinct from the demand curve, just like we saw for the monopolist. And again, it's just because in order for the firm to sell more of its product, it needs to lower the price. So it's going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and then it's going to add some markup to that price of the good above its marginal cost. And again, that markup is going to be constrained by the demand curve. So this portion here is what shows us its markup. But consumer sovereignty is still key here. All right, and lastly here, you can see that we've included the average total cost curve in this graph, right? So our monopolist also has an average total cost curve. We leave that off their graph because for them, we don't need to know how much profit they're making because no one else can compete with them. For monopolistic competition, including the average total cost curve is important because if the firm makes positive profits, like we're seeing in this case, they're going to likely face competition, right? So in this case, the firm's price, right, exceeds their average total cost of producing the given level of output, meaning that they have some positive profit, right? We can use that same profit formula from before to calculate profit. All right. So what happens when firms have positive profit? New firms enter. And so what we're going to see is a shift in our firms in the market demand for this good and an increase in the elasticity. So meaning it's going to get flatter. So now that we have two firms in the market, right, again, we see this shift of the demand curve in and towards the origin, so down and to the left, and the curve also becomes flatter. Similarly, marginal revenue is going to change as well, right? It depends on the firm's demand, so it's going to change with demand. And the reason that demand is changing in this way is now our previous firm faces a more direct competitor, right? Not a perfect substitute, but there is now a close substitute available for consumers. So we're going to see some consumers leave the market for our initial firm and go and purchase from the second firm. And we're going to see that they're also going to be more price sensitive because if our first firm tries to increase their price too high, consumers are just going to jump to that very close substitute of firm two who just joined. Okay, so now what that means is that the firm is still going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, but that markup is going to be much less than it was before, right? Because that demand curve now is closer to the origin and flatter. And so the firm is going to be earning less profit and it's going to have more of a constraint on how high it can make that markup before consumers start shifting away to their competitor. Because in this example we have positive profits, we're going to expect another firm to enter, and that's going to continue until we see in the market profit equaling zero. So this is a important conclusion of the monopolistically competitive model is that firms are going to be earning zero profit in the long run. And the reason for that is there are no barriers to entry. So firms can enter if they see current incumbents earning positive profits, and they'll enter until those profits are eroded. Okay, so that's what this sub n means here on the labels for this graph. It's the number of firms needed to hit that profit equal to 0 point. And again, we can see here for our firm, they're producing where marginal revenue equals marginal cost and marking up, but that is constrained again by the demand curve, how much they can mark up. And that point of the price that they charge, right, as informed by the demand curve, is tangent to their average total cost curve, meaning that they earn zero profit. So that's how we know they're earning zero profit in this third image. With that, that's going to conclude our lecture material for Chapter 9 and 11.7. After this, we're going to move on to price discrimination. But last thing I want to cover in this video is a practice problem with the perfect competition model. All right, so I'll just bring that up here. Okay. So with perfect competition, it's going to look a lot, not perfect competition, monopolistic competition. We are going to have a process that looks a lot like that of the monopoly problems that we did. For this example, we're going to say that we're looking at Popeyes The demand for their chicken is quantity demanded equal to 100 minus 2 times the price. And they're in a monopolistically competitive market for fried chicken, meaning that firms can enter and exit at will, and they're able to differentiate their products. But right now, Popeyes is the only one in the market, right? So they're currently the only one serving this market, but competitors could enter. And then their total costs are given as 20 times quantity. So we want to know for Popeyes how much fried chicken they're making and what price they're selling it at. So we know that for monopolistically competitive firms, just like monopolists, just like perfectly competitive firms, they're going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So we need to find each of these values. All right. So let's start with marginal revenue. To find marginal revenue, we're going to first solve for the inverse demand equation by solving for the price. So we will do that. So we'll add 2 times the price to both sides. We'll get 2 times the price plus quantity is equal to 100. Then we'll subtract quantity from both sides. That gives us 2 times the price equal to 100 minus quantity. And then we're going to divide both sides by 2. So we get price equal to 50 minus 1/2 times quantity, right? Or we could rewrite this as quantity over 2. Okay. Because this is a linear demand equation, we can double that B value, right? There's this 1/2 modifying quantity is B, because we know that our marginal revenue is given as A minus 2 times B. So marginal revenue then is 50 minus 2 times 1/2, which is 1, times B times, 2 times 1/2, which gives us 1 times quantity. Okay, so marginal revenue is 50 minus Q. Marginal cost is just our derivative of our total cost equation with respect to output. And so our marginal costs here are 20, right? They're constant. So now we can set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. So we'll have 50 minus Q equal to 20. Solving for Q, we're going to add quantity to both sides. So that gives us 50 equal to 20 plus Q. Then we'll subtract 20 from both sides. So we get 30 equal to quantity. So that should be Popeye's profit maximizing amount of output. Now we want to find the price that they charge, and that's going to be informed by our demand curve. So our demand curve is given as price equal to 50 minus 1/2 times quantity, and we'll substitute our value for quantity that we just found. So we'll have price equal to 50 minus 1/2 times 30. So we get price equal to 50 minus 15, and that's going to get us a price of $35 for 30 pieces of chicken. Okay. Moving on to part B, we're going to find how much producer surplus Popeyes is making. So producer surplus, right, is just going to be the difference between the price that Popeyes receives and their marginal cost at their given level of output, which marginal cost is constant at 20, so it's 20. And we're going to multiply that by the number of chicken pieces sold, which is 30. So we get producer surplus is equal to 15 times 30. So producer surplus is $450. So you may be asking yourself, why did we find producer surplus and not profit? All right. This is to show you another way of testing whether or not the firm is earning profits. So if we have a producer surplus of 450, that doesn't tell us their profits, but we can use that value and compare it to the total cost of Popeye to see what profits they are making. So remember the difference between producer surplus and profit. Producer surplus ignores fixed costs. Profit includes fixed costs. So if Popeyes is earning no profit, zero profit, then fixed costs should equal producer surplus. So in this case, 450. If Popeyes is earning positive profits, then producer surplus should be less than, excuse me, not less than fixed costs, greater than fixed costs, right? And that would mean that fixed costs need to be less than 450. And if Popeyes is earning losses, right, negative profit, then that means that producer surplus is less than fixed costs. So fixed cost would be less than 450. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our given total cost equation for our firm. It is total cost equal to 20 times quantity. Looking at that total cost equation, right, there are no fixed costs, right? There's only variable costs because the only term is modified by Q. So that means if we go back to our relationships, that fixed cost is 0, so it is less than 450, so Popeyes is earning a positive profit, right? Another way we could do that is to see, okay, profit we know is equal to price minus average total cost times output. We know that the price is 35, and we know that the output of our firm is 30, so we just need to find average total cost, which is just total cost divided by quantity. So we're going to get 20Q over Q and gives us 20, right? So it's the same in this case as marginal costs. So we would find that Popeye's profit is the same in this case as its producer surplus at $450. That doesn't always happen, okay? Profit does not always equal producer surplus. In this case, it does, all right? So now we can answer the question, will firms enter the market for fried chicken? Yes, they will, right? Because Popeye's producer surplus exceeds their fixed costs. That tells us they're earning positive profits. And we also confirmed that by actually solving for their profits. And so we would expect firms to enter, and they're going to enter until the price equals average total cost. All right. We can actually identify exactly how high Popeye's fixed cost would need to be, right, for that to be the case, and it would be $450 would be sufficient. And if Popeye's total cost were instead 20 times Q plus 450, then we would know that profit is 0 and no firms would enter that fried chicken market. So that ends our example problem. We'll be doing more in class, and so I will see you there.